Hi, and welcome back to Books and Beyond, another amazing episode lined up. This one I am so excited about, with a fantastic guest. I'm joined this week by Nancy. Nancy Gleason is a professor over at New York University, and we're going to talk about the future of work. And the reason why I'm so excited about this episode, apart from getting to chat to Nancy, is that we're actually going to be talking about the future of work, but from the academia side. So what is academia doing to assist in our transformation as we start to think about the future of work? And we're going to talk about the subjects like ChatGPT and the effects that is having, amongst other things. So incredibly topical. It's amazing to have you on the show, Nancy.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
So as is standard for our guests on Books and Beyond, we like to learn a little bit more about you. And so our usual intro is who you are, what you do, and I guess more importantly, why you do it.
Sure. So as you eloquently pronounced, my name is Nancy Gleason, and I'm a professor at New York University Abu Dhabi here in the United Arab Emirates, where I'm sitting right now on a lovely day. And I teach courses on the future of work and the future of education. And I do research on the ways in which education needs to change for the automation economy. Why do I do this? A lot of reasons. I love the moment within which you get to see people become self-aware. It's a privilege and one of the true pleasures of teaching in higher education. I work at a unique university. NYU Abu Dhabi has students from 115 different countries all around the world. We have one of the most innovative core curriculums in the world. And I like working in young countries. The UAE is 50 years old, ambitious, hungry, looking forward. And that's different than a lot of countries that are more like museums than labs. So I do it for a lot of different reasons, but I love meeting people from all over the world and trying to think about how we can tackle some of the biggest, most wicked challenges we have on the planet. So that's some of what I do and why I.
Amazing. Okay, I love that. And clearly I am from a country that is certainly a museum in the UK, currently living in one in the US, which is not quite as old, but certainly is a lot older than 50 years. And having been to the UAE myself a couple of times, I can certainly, innovation there, both in an architecture and just in the general ways, it is certainly something I've taken away from my visit. So I can imagine it being an amazing place to learn, to teach, and certainly the future of work. And I know we're going to talk about this, and I know you're going to highlight how it differs depending on where you're working from, I guess, to a degree. But in your mind, let's talk a little bit about the future of work. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I get so frustrated by this phrase because it's quite gimmicky these days. And it doesn't tend to talk about the youth that are actually going to do these jobs. It talks about trends and labor markets and demographics sometimes. But the truth of the matter is the nature of expertise is changing because of a combination of technologies that make up the fourth industrial revolution. And so this includes robotics, the Internet of Things, blockchain, augmented reality, virtual reality, and iterations of what we call artificial intelligence. So that is one stream of what the future of work is. It's what is the talent pool, what is the labor market, and how are firms and corporations going to find the talent they need to continue to make money. That is one track of the future of work. It's also about dignity in work and the 5 billion people on the planet that are not sustaining themselves in a way that we would find fulfilling and define as thriving. So what ways can we think about work in the future that brings dignity to the person doing that work, or more dignity? How do we harness that for the Sustainable Development Goals? In particular, as we get to March 8th and think about International Women's Day, I'm quite passionate about Sustainable Development Goal number 5, gender equity. And then a third aspect of this is the regulatory environment around this. So if we do have the automation of jobs, which I do anticipate, are we going to switch to universal income or universal basic income? In some countries, we may. Will we have 4-day, 3-day work weeks and not condensed work, but going down to a 35-hour work week, which is proposed in some countries already? So these are sort of 3 different trends that have to do with the future of work and how I would define it.
Excellent. And I actually have a friend and ex-colleague who works for an organization who have now been doing 4-day weeks for feels like a long time in the UK, probably a good 12, 18 months. So hats off to the guys over at Atom. So they really have embraced that and shifted to a 4-day week. I think it's pretty much everyone in the firm. I might be wrong. I need to do a little bit more reading on that. But I think that's the aim for all, right? I mean, you want to make sure that you have a fulfilling role, absolutely. You know, I happen to love my job. I love what I do. And therefore, I'm happy working 5 days a week. But you know what? Probably would also love to work 4 days a week as well. How often do you say, weekend just flew by. I can't believe the weekend's over already. It'd be a lot better if it was increased by 50%. So I get it. I think that's definitely the future. And interestingly, I've posted a couple of things on LinkedIn recently around WALL-E, you know, where, you know, as a human race, you know, we have robots, we have virtual reality, augmented reality, and you know, the WALL-E cartoon is basically has just been served by AI in theory, and we become fat and lazy, and maybe we're fulfilled, but it's by TV programs and things that we're watching and seeing and experiences that we're having, all while sat in the comfort of some kind of massaging chair, which I'm hoping is not the future that we are maneuvering towards. But that would be key, because I guess you really are helping to shape the minds of the people who are going to have to embrace the future as they enter the jobs market. And it would be interesting just to kind of get your view in, you know, how the education industry as a whole is helping to prepare those making, you know, the move into the corporate world, you know, having to think about these technologies and how they are changing how work is done. So, you know, again, unique viewpoint from you being, I guess, the first guest from the world of academia. So I'm intrigued to hear what you have to say around how you are helping to, I guess, shape the future mindset of people entering the jobs market.
Yeah, this is an excellent question and an important one. And it really does matter what country you're in, what the answer is, because demographics matter. If you have a youth bubble, then the education industry has a bigger role to play. If you have an aging population, the way you would see in Japan or Italy, the schools are shrinking and shutting down. So the education sector is playing an important role, but there's more people out of school than in school. And the reverse is the challenge in Nigeria, where something, you know, a very large portion of the population is between the age of 15 and 24. So the education as an industry, for sure, has an important role to play. How effective it is on that depends on how empowered it is within the governance structures of a given nation state. There are models that work very well at delivering people who can think for themselves. Variations of the liberal arts model are the best, but they're too expensive per pupil to scale for an entire nation. And so the ways in which education is transforming is it's a debate about whether or not it should. Are we teaching for employability, or are we teaching for self-awareness and critical thinking? Are we teaching for professional skills, like we do in professional schools, everything from nursing to lawyers and all around, or are we training people to think and not just about a specific area? But an argument that Klaus Schwab made at Davos in 2015 or 2016, and also in his book on the Fourth Industrial Revolution, is that the education industry cannot do this transformation on its own. It has to partner with government and industry. That being said, that would be in public education sphere. But in the private sector, what we're seeing is a burgeoning ed tech industry. So if you think of education outside of formal education, then we are seeing a very interesting play with venture capital funds like GSV in the United States or Bright Eye in Europe, on which I am a member of the advisory board, who are seeding an education industry that functions outside of formal government-sanctioned education. And these are everything from online driver's license training to certifications in important industries that are required in order to be employed. So the education industry is massive, But the question is, are we preparing people for employability? And there, I think the industry has argued no, at least for higher education that is not professional. Many of the talent that come through have to be retrained by industry or upskilled or reskilled into a specific task. I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just that industry finds it inefficient. Now, ways in which within a given state, higher education, tertiary education is what ministries of education are doing is expanding options for local populations. Singapore in particular has been very good at this, increasing options around what in the United States we would call community colleges or associate degrees. These are called polytechnics in Singapore. These are 2-year non-bachelor's degrees, but they do have a valuable certification beyond secondary education into the tertiary space. So those create a valuable opportunity for employability for a specific type of learner and an employer that wants doesn't necessarily need someone with a full 4-year bachelor's degree. So it's also about variety and options to help with the transformation that is going to change not only the types of skills, but the variety of skills we need in the talent pool for a given country.
Amazing. I mean, so much to unpick from that. I don't know where to go next on the questions that I have. I guess the things I'm thinking about, how important, to be honest, is it now to have many of the degrees that are there? Is it what you learn, or is it what you learn and your ability to repeat what you've learned? Or is it an ability to investigate or be creative? Like, what do you feel are the life skills that you are able to learn in secondary education, regardless of where it's hosted, that are going to be most applicable in employment in the future? Because, I don't write an essay about anything in my work. I consume content, I summarize, I ideas, new ways of thinking, and then filter this throughout my client base and my organization. That's what I do. Now, that's not necessarily a skill that anybody taught me. And that wasn't something that I learned in secondary education. Yet that is probably one of the redefining most important aspects of my skill set. So I guess I'm just wondering, as we start to think about the role that technology is going to play more and more importantly in the future, how important or not is education in its present form going to be? And I guess I'd be really interested in your views there. And the second part to the question, how easy or not is it going to be for the education sector to amend? And I guess it depends on the country and how ingrained the current style is to change its. So I guess the two questions there. So first one is, how important is education going to continue to be in the future? And secondly, if we do need to start thinking more about HECI skills as opposed to STEM skills, how well are we set up to be able to make that shift in the education industry at large?
Yeah, and these are very important questions. So how important is education in the future? I think it's extremely important. But what it looks like will most likely be very different than it looks today. I think it's important to keep in mind for higher education, for tertiary education, its job is not only to educate students, it is also to conduct research. So that is a different part of the academy that plays a role in the creation of new knowledge and development of original thought. So it has two functions. I don't think that second function should go away. Whether or not it does, I don't know. Now, in many countries, what we're seeing is that the value of a 4-year undergraduate degree is decreasing. It's too expensive to service the debt that you get. It can't service its own debt. Let's put it that way. Part of the reason is because of the shortened shelf life of knowledge. But that doesn't mean you don't need to know stuff. So Ian Leslie wrote a fabulous book called Curious. He's a British journalist. And in there, he makes a great case for education and the value of content. So he says curiosity rises in tandem with knowledge, and that people with curiosity walk around life with an augmented view of reality, that you can see layers that others cannot see. And basically what you're describing about yourself, Wayne, here is that you have that curiosity and those additional layers. What we call that in learning sciences is strategic knowledge. You know what you know and you know what you're good at. Not all people have that, but it takes time to build content, to have something to stick to so that you can analyze and think about and do more complex thinking to get at the stage where you're at right now, what you've described, your own strategic knowledge. We call that metacognition, where you think about your own thinking. You can't do that at a deeper level until you have a lot of knowledge. It needs something to stick to. So that should be the role of the academy. But what we're seeing is that employers are credentialing in different ways. They're verifying skills in different ways. They're going around the academy to find talent, not least because the academy in many countries has been gatekeeping and not meeting firms' desires for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. So if the talent pool coming out of universities isn't diverse enough, then firms have to go elsewhere and not use the undergraduate degree or the master's degree or even the PhD as a reason to weed out CVs when someone's applying for a job. And so industry is changing credentialing. This is having an impact on education. And what we see many saying, and this has been said for several years, but in the future, you will go to work to get an education instead of get an education to get a job. And it doesn't mean that all universities are going away. We still need people to advance knowledge. But I think the disruption that's coming in particular from capabilities like ChatGPT is that it's probably not necessary for it to be a 4-year degree for the average person doing the average undergraduate education. And ministries of education in different countries will have to decide how and what workload units they want to use to measure education. So how important is education in the future? Education will always be important. But what it means for employability is probably different. And I think you'll start to see the employer become the educator. And so that would be my response to how important is education in the future.
I think, because what it feels like is actually it's not just the education industry that needs to change, but actually it's industry in general. And I was fascinated listening to you talking then around the knowledge and actually that what you're going to do, the research angle, let's put it that way, of secondary education and basically learning, absorbing, building up a repository of knowledge that you are then able to I guess create outcomes, new thoughts, ideas from. Very similar, I guess, and not trying to hadn't drawn the conclusion before, but I basically created a knowledge pool in my mind that I'm then able to run a brain version of ChatGPT on. What I hadn't realized is that I'd spent the last 20 years basically training my algorithm to be able to spit out semi-coherent content as a result of the 20 years training that I'd done within industry. So I love that idea. And clearly, when people talk about experience, I guess that's what we're talking about here, right? So the experience I got was doing, reading, learning, researching. In fact, when I joined ISG, I spent the first 3 months like a bookworm, just absorbing knowledge. And at the time I thought, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm being paid for this. I feel like I'm not achieving anything. Yet what that enabled me to do was create this bank of knowledge that was at the cutting edge at the time and create new thoughts that were, again, well ahead of where the rest of the market was, that enabled me then to be able to be steps ahead of my clients. And we often I guess, undervalue the role of knowledge and learning and research, because we're in the rat race. It's like, I haven't got time to listen to 7 podcasts a week. I haven't got time to read these articles because, now I need it to be summarized by a technology so that it only takes me 17 seconds to read this 43-page PDF. But the reality is, are we at risk, I guess, at that point of skim reading and therefore not creating this bank of knowledge, this experience in our brains that enable us to be creative and to think about things in different ways and to build out new ideas? I hadn't thought about that until now. So thank you. I need to take some time about the risks of technology in this instance. So that's super insightful. I love where the conversation's going. I was keen, and I touched upon it there, Nancy, around the role the enterprise has to play. Now, in my view, I was thinking about this theme as, the enterprise needs to inform the educational bodies of the type of candidate it needs. That's what I was thinking before we started this episode. I think the reality is it's definitely a partnership, isn't it? And, most organizations themselves are undergoing this shift in how work is completed, the type of skills that they will need for the future. I spent the last 13 years automating work, and, the vast majority of the jobs that I have historically been automating have required some kind of degree, or people have had degrees doing the jobs that are now being automated. And so I think it is a two-way street. It's a partnership, isn't it? Talk to us a little bit more around, what the enterprise has to do and how education and the enterprise do need to rethink about the type of candidates, the type of learning, the skills, etc., that need to be produced in order, I guess, for work to continue to flourish and for us as a race, I guess, to be productive.
Yeah, I think enterprise is interesting because for the first time ever, we have economic growth without job growth in most countries. And so industry is still making money, but people aren't getting paid. So part of my challenge with this, what I've said in many different public forums and opinion pieces, is industry needs to start paying for the employees it gets in a different way. It needs to actually do direct cash transfer to universities, in my opinion, so that they get the cutting edge research they want, they get the cutting edge talent they want, and we continue to have universities that stay open and don't bankrupt the students. So I think part of their role is paying for it in a way that they haven't been in the past. I do think also that industry has an obligation to keep people employed. So even and I do believe that the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution will cause significant unemployment. And the new jobs that are created will be done by different people, or at least require a different skill set. So in economics, we call this technological unemployment, but on the ground, it has a nice economic name, but on the ground, it's very disruptive to families and communities and children, etc. So I do think we're going to have that, and enterprise can smooth that by creating new and different jobs. So for example, in South Africa, there's a 61% youth unemployment rate right now. Industry has to play a role in fixing that, to stabilize the economy so that they can continue to benefit from natural resources and all the other things that they're extracting from the South African economy. It can't be rent-seeking. It's not sustainable in any of the Sustainable Development Goal contexts. But I think it also matters what the state is telling employers the purpose of education actually is. Right? In many states, the purpose of education is to enable peace so that you can be closer to your respective faith and spirituality, whether that be a god or multiple gods. And in the history of philosophical education, that has been the purpose of education. There are others that say the purpose of education is activism. Martin Luther Thich Han, who Martin Luther King got nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, a very famous Vietnamese educational philosopher and Buddhist, said that the purpose of education had to be to actively pursue peace. So, and different schools embody different purposes of education, whether they're public or private, but it cannot be only to serve the economy, because there aren't any jobs on the other side. for a lot of youth in many economies. And that sets you up for a lot of instability that doesn't benefit society or industry. So enterprise has to get ready to play a bigger governance role in society, I think, and partnering with governments in a new way. For example, here in the UAE during COVID-19, the telecom industry partnered up with the K-12 space to make free internet available for students during the school day so that they could get to their online classes if they happen to be in homes without internet connectivity. Now, that works in a small country. That's not feasible in a country as large as, say, Indonesia or the United States. And this assumes perfect electricity access, which is something you wouldn't have, for say, in a large city like Lagos. But also, I think enterprise has to get ready for a different type of learner. We have Gen Alpha, 4 years away from universities, 8 years away from the job market, or 4 years away from the job market if they don't go to university. We're going to start to see things like flash teams. And so these are teams that are hired quickly and coordinated to interact on increasingly complex projects for a very short period of time. And here I'm channeling the expertise of Melissa Valentine, who's an associate professor at Stanford University in their Management Science and Engineering department. And she does excellent work at their Center for Work Technology and Organization. And so she's been talking about these flash teams as a unique feature of massive online labor markets. But our KPIs and our performance indicators and our HR departments do not allow for that flexibility almost everywhere in the world. So we have this idea of the conversation about where the future of work is going. And then we have cumbersome bureaucratic finance and procurement teams. So the reality on the ground makes it feel like this stuff isn't coming, but it really is. And what it means is if your procurement team can't get on board, your enterprise will shut down. Maybe slowly and painfully, but inevitably. And so what role does the enterprise play in helping to ensure the education industry is providing the best skilled candidates? I would flip that around and say, what is enterprise doing to attract the best skilled candidates? Because they aren't going to stick around for KPIs that stifle innovation.
Wow, that is probably the best ending to an episode I think I've ever recorded. I love the way that we flipped that round back onto the enterprise. And it's so true. I mean, just to add to that, the role of the gig employee, which I guess is what, we would see, we'd call it flash teams here, but the pulling together of individuals to create and to deliver on a certain goal or program. I've heard called flash teams, but I do like that. Is the future. I read something somewhere not too long ago that 1 in 4 customer service agents by 2027 is actually going to be a gig employee. Again, not just flash projects, but maybe just flash, okay, we've got a spike in demand. We can augment people off the street through the use of AI and knowledge and other things to be able to help us in a flash type project. So, there's definitely, I see it as well. And I love the fact that actually this is not down. The education industry is creating, and I guess at large, we are creating different types of employee who consume content in different ways, learn in different ways, will have different skills. And it's the enterprise's role to figure out how best to unleash their potential that will succeed in the future. Otherwise, they, I guess, are going to be the dinosaurs in their industry as they continue to lack the skills that the new employee of the future is going to be bringing into their workplace. Wow, love it. Nancy, this has been an absolute dream episode. Absolutely love the conversation. I mentioned to you before, I cannot wait to listen to this again on one of my runs. So thank you ever so much. Super interesting. And I would love to catch up with you again on this. I think there's a lot more to unpack in the discussion.
Great. Well, thanks so much for having me on Bots and Beyond. And I really enjoyed the conversation as well.
Excellent. And thank you all for listening. I'm sure if you have found the conversation as exhilarating as I have and have any other questions, I guess, Nancy, people can find you on LinkedIn. Is that probably the best way to reach out if they've got any queries or questions?
LinkedIn or Twitter, I'm at NW Gleason.
Excellent. I will have to give you a follow on there as well. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Nancy. Thank you very much for listening. And we'll see you again for another episode of Bots and Beyond in a couple of weeks.